welcome to Alberta Primetime. I'm Jefferson Humphreys.
And I'm Jennifer Martin. There is a lot of office space sitting empty in Calgary, and a glut of new construction is sending the commercial vacancy rate soaring.
And that may be good news for companies looking to relocate to our province, but what are the implications for the market overall? Some say crisis. We'll also take a look at the residential rental market.
Also tonight, many of us look to the internet for information and communication, but if your life needs a little extra kick, you just might find it in an alternate identity. That's coming up in a few minutes.
And there's a new Battle of Alberta brewing, but it has nothing to do with hockey or football. Stick around for the pop culture panel in our second half hour.
But first, a flood of for rent signs. That's where Primetime begins tonight.
Not long ago, Calgary had the lowest office space vacancy rate and the priciest in the country. Now, some experts say the downtown office market is heading for a crisis. 33.5 million square feet of office space already exists. Almost 9% of that sits vacant, and another 7 million is under construction, scheduled to be completed by 2011. What will it mean for prices? How is the rest of the province doing? And is there truth to the phrase, if you build it, they will come? And joining us now to help shed some light on the rental situation here in Alberta, Dale Willerton, founder of The Lease Coach, and in Calgary, Greg Kwong is the Regional Managing Director for CB Richard Ellis, as well Randy Fennessy, President and CEO for Colliers International Calgary. Welcome to Alberta Primetime, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks, happy to be here.
I'll start with you, Dale. We heard some stats. Are we in crisis in the province?
Well, not from a tenant's perspective. High vacancy rates, and we'll drop the rent down. It'll be good for the tenants.
Okay, Greg, what's your take on this?
I don't think we're in crisis right today. If you look at an average over the last 20 years, if we're at an 8% vacancy rate, which is what we're gauging, as well as I know Colliers is, that's a pretty well stabilized market from our perspective, and it presents a nice equilibrium. It's what's really concerning is what's coming in ahead of us to 3-4 years from now.
Okay, and I guess, Randy, those are some of the decisions that right now you're in the midst of making. You're building 8th Avenue Place, adding over 1 million square feet of space to the marketplace. At this point, from what I understand, none of it pre-leased. Are you nervous?
Not really. I mean, there's nothing that we can announce today, but we've been very active, and there's a lot of tenants in the downtown core, larger tenants that need to do something over the next couple of years, and we're still basically 2 years away from completion on that project, so we're feeling pretty good about our prospects for getting the space leased. Vacancy rates, of course, are on the climb, so that's going to have some downward pressure on rental rates. So for all landlords building new product these days, they've had to adjust their pro formas downward somewhat. But hey, it's the cyclical nature of the oil patch in Calgary, and we always have our highs and lows, and it's hard to predict what the market's going to look like a couple years from now.
Okay. Dale, give us a sense of what you're seeing in terms of tenants requesting renegotiations of leases. What are we seeing with prices? What's happening in the market right now?
Well, unfortunately, not enough tenants are going to the landlord and negotiating for the rent break that they need. And that's causing problems, of course. So for a tenant who puts their space up for sublease, the rental factor is not as high as the factor of the employees that fill that space. So some tenants are leaving sublease space empty, hoping to rent it. Others are continuing to occupy it until they actually find a replacement tenant.
Okay. Randy, what's it going to take for prices to drop? Will it really be a matter of sort of the market taking over and really the supply and demand taking hold across the board, or are we seeing them starting to go down? Where are we at with prices?
Prices have come down, particularly in the sublet market, because that's the area where most of this new added vacancy has come from. You know, it's a tough call. When you look at the market, it's fairly segregated. And if you're looking at the top end of the market, AA office space like a Bankers Hall or a Cantera Tower, those types of buildings hold their rents much stronger than the B and the C class market. And if you take the vacancy rate and dissect it by class, the AA market in downtown Calgary is about 2.2% vacant, whereas the B class and C class markets are 13% and 15% vacancy respectively. So there's a real difference depending on what kind of product you're looking to lease.
And how sought after it is. Greg, with more space coming on the market, are there some positive things we can look to here?
Oh, of course, but it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. As was mentioned before, that if you're a tenant of any size at this point, most people are looking at the cheaper alternative, which is the sublet portion of the vacancy. Long term, if you look at globally, any companies that are looking at Calgary to move here, certainly the employment base is important, but your overall operating costs are important. So when those start coming down, yeah, I guess the old Alberta advantage, which we haven't used in a long time, that adage may come back into play.
Okay. I'm just, from your point of view, Randy, I'm just wondering, you know, certainly when we've had discussions around residential, single-family dwelling, those types of things, one of the factors that seems to play into this is what you paid in terms of trades and construction costs when something was being built versus when you come out the other end, sort of its worth. With these projects that you're talking about, obviously being much longer term, are you getting hit with some of that, where you paid a premium for the building of some of this stuff, and when you come out the other end, it just won't have its same worth?
Well, any building that's under construction today, you know, that development process probably started 4 or 5 years ago, and buildings that entered into the latter stages of the market rise were burdened with higher construction costs than those who got in at the front end. So, you know, the cost of construction has come up, but over the course of the last year, and a lot of those are fixed price contracts, so it's, you know, there's a maximum to what the cost is going to be on those. But the good news on the construction front is that the cost of leasehold improvements for tenants has come down fairly significantly, making you know, office interior space much more affordable to build.
A year and a half ago, the construction industry was quoting inflation rates of anywhere from 1.5% to 2% per month, and now you don't see much of that. It's pretty well flat at this point. So seemingly, you think things are coming off from that perspective.
Okay, and finally, Dale. Contracts were just brought up. Let's talk about, could we potentially be in a situation where you've got, because of a contract that's signed for a lease for 5 or 10 years, that you've got someone paying substantially more than some new kid on the block? I mean, will we see some of that?
It happens all the time. Very seldom are all the tenants in a building paying exactly the same rental rate. It can be quite different, depending on where the leasing cycle is, when you came in or when your lease came up for renewal. If a tenant has a lease coming up for renewal in the next 12 to 18 months, this is perfect. This is exactly when they can negotiate their long-term contract or lease agreement to stay, and if they can't get the deal they want, another landlord will be happy to take them.
Okay, great discussion, gentlemen. Certainly appreciate it. We'll ask you to hang around if you would, Greg, and thanks very much to Dale and Randy for taking the time this evening.